what part am I playing in where I am?
What part am I playing?
Whether it's a job,
Yes,
or a relationship, or a habit or circumstance, what part do I own?
Yeah. And that's where the research shows that people who have a sense of agency, we've talked about this internal locus of control,
Yep.
are the people who actually are more likely to be successful and happy and have actually positive results.
Yep.
Because there's that sense of agency as well. So if we can get past the yuckiness and the self-blame and the self-criticism,
Yes.
then we can get past the excuses that we might say to ourselves because we're blaming others or circumstances.
That's right.
And then we're stuck as a result.
I'm dreading this one.
I know. This was the one where there was a lot of exclamation marks and not quite expletives, but maybe expletives.
Salty language.
Salty language. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Bear with us because we've had to do a lot of processing and preparing for this one. Mm-hmm. And the good thing is you're along for the ride.
Yeah.
So the good thing is you can turn it off at any point, pause and go, okay, I have to ponder that thought.
The good thing is that they also didn't have to see the process that we went through to get to this point where we can even talk about it.
That's right. So now here we're sitting with smiles. Life coach Gillian and Dr. Mary, we are all pulled together.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
That's it. All pulled together. Okay. We better tell them the news of what this chapter is about.
So the real chapter heading is called Never Again Fail to Ask Why You Are Where You Are. But we didn't like that one.
No, it was so long.
What do we say?
Where are you?
Those big, when you walk into a mall?
Yeah.
And you see the big map, the interactive map.
Oh, I hate those.
And it tells you where you're standing.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go, where do I want to go? And it's inevitably at the very other end of the mall.
Of course.
But it's a really good thing to say, where am I?
Yeah.
Like, where am I? Where are you?
I know.
In the situation, the whatever, circumstance.
Well, it's not even just where are you, but it's why are you where you are?
I know.
And so this is the quote. I'm sorry, but I have to read it because you're along for the ride. So this is Dr. Cloud saying that one of the biggest difference between successful people and others is that in love and life and relationships and in business across all the spectrum, successful people always ask themselves, what part am I playing in this situation? Said another way, they don't see themselves as victims, even when they are, as in bad things can happen to us. That's not our fault. But they always ask, is there something to be learned about themselves so they can either turn the situation around or make sure they never find themselves in it ever again? They say something like this: I have contributed to this in some way. What do I need to learn?
Oh.
Talk about personal responsibility.
Well, and the thing is, he goes on to some harder things in the chapter, but at that point, you're thinking, I have to take ownership of my part, even when I have been victimized.
Exactly.
That's really harsh.
It is very, well, he's very gentle about how he says.
I know.
Because there's some,
I was a little bit harsher.
Yeah, there's some really crappy things that happen to people.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely not your fault. He never says that. But it's always being able to kind of go, okay, what can I learn from the situation?
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that you skip past the healing and the grieving and all that you have to do. But there is a point of reflection.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. It could be either PTSD when you're stuck or post-traumatic growth.
Right.
Where you learn from it.
That's right.
That's a whole other thing. But this is just day-to-day life.
Yeah, so he's it's ouch, 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 ouch.
Yeah.
Really all over it.
Yeah.
And, when I step back and go, what part am I playing in where I am?
What part am I playing?
Whether it's a job.
Yes.
Or a relationship or a habit or circumstance. What part do I own?
Yeah. And that's where the research shows that people who have a sense of agency, we've talked about this internal locus of control.
Yep.
Are the people who actually are more likely to be successful and happy and have actually positive results.
Yep.
Because there's that sense of agency as well. So if we can get past the yuckiness and the self-blame and the self-criticism,
Yes.
then we can get past the excuses that we might say to ourselves because we're blaming others or circumstances.
That's right.
And then we're stuck as a result.
Yeah, so just take so here we can take the global marketplace, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And the economy is crap and political situations are crap. But we do have a role in our response to all that too.
Right.
Right? There are things in our agency that we can do, learn about ourselves, manage about ourselves. So it's not all lost.
Right.
Even though it feels that way sometimes.
Yes. And that's the thing, is everything happens to us through the filter of us, our interpretations, our feelings, our responses. And so that's the part that, as much as we can have self-awareness and own that, not only can we have a better perspective, a more optimistic perspective, but we can actually end up responding in a way that could better help the situation, have a better result.
Yeah.
You know?
He talks about this situation. He talks about this woman who, when you get a new car and it has the new car smell.
Yeah.
And she goes, she'd been married like 8 times, and she goes, I'm on number 9. The new husband smell wears off pretty fast. And he's like, whoa, what part are you playing in having 8 or 9 husbands?
I know.
Who's the common denominator here?
Exactly. That's intense. 8 or 9 husbands. I couldn't have enough lifetimes for that.
I don't have enough energy for one.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So, successful people recognize that they are not only acted on and acted upon,
Right.
but they are also actors in the situation.
Right.
And we play a part in where we are in life, in a situation, and what are we contributing, and how do we choose a new path forward?
Right. And I love the example he used here because I'm so resonating with it. He's talking about a client who seems to always find the critical people in her life.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter where she is, there's always criticism. And now part of it is perhaps an oversensitivity to criticism, but actually, as he poked away, it turns out that her desire for approval would actually make her unconsciously seek out people who are most likely to be critical of her in a given situation and work really, really hard to gain their approval.
Now, you've talked about this.
Yeah.
You've talked about this in the past, where you could choose the prickliest person in the room, right?
Because I want everyone to love me.
Of course, and work them in order to gain their approval.
So I just did this talk. Again, one of those things that I got talked into. Well, I didn't. I said yes without thinking it through in terms of the energy. Regardless, I'm in this audience and I don't know what was going on, but everyone's just kind of staring at me like this. And I'm talking about stuff that's really important. And they're non-responsive.
Oh.
I do not like talking to non-responsive. Well, the thing about me is that the more non-responsive they are, the more I'm like, oh yeah?
I'll show you.
Make you like me. So I picked the one who was not looking at me, in fact, had her head turned away, and I started directing my conversations to her. And I started to joke, and I was really open and sharing about, because it's about parenting, and I was sharing about my struggles, got them laughing. They started off the tee, tee, and then by the end of it, there was full out belly laughing happening. That I was like, yes, I got them. Isn't that terrible?
No, I'm sorry, but it's not, because there's nothing worse than a blank stare audience.
Yeah.
So I can understand that, but you can see how this woman is doing exactly the same thing that you were doing.
I know. But how much energy do I waste doing that is the question.
Yeah, well, an awful lot.
I know. And the thing is, I'm pretty good at it. So I have enough success stories that makes me do it again. So it reinforces that behavior.
But for this woman that he's talking about, who's seeking out the critical people, and she's finding them in every arena of her life.
Yeah.
And then as he pokes away at it and he gets to the underlying motivation of why she's drawn there,
Yeah.
that leads us to say, when I'm playing a part in a situation or circumstance, and I can take responsibility to see patterns in my life,
Yeah.
then what is the underlying motivation when I recognize those patterns?
Right. And often it's internal. So he goes on to say, who we are on the inside plays a role in many situations in which we find ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So who are you on the inside? Knowing that is really key.
Are you really asking me?
Sure.
No.
Who you are on the inside is not wanting to be vulnerable.
That's right, exactly.
So that's the question right there.
And Cloud says, this is hard because the word enable is always a nicky word.
Yeah.
Right? But Cloud says we enable people to hold positions in our life that play into our perceived role in our own story.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So, we can call it out in another person. If you have a friend who's constantly dating the wrong kind of guy, you can sniff it a mile away.
Right.
But there's an underlying motivation of why they're choosing that type of person over and over and over again, and the patterns that they have. So they are enabling that person to hold that position in their life.
I know.
It's really
give a lot of
hard.
power to them. I mean, this is the whole concept of codependency.
Yes.
And, with codependency, we often kind of think about it more in terms of addictions and non-addictions. But I think we all have some level of codependency patterns in our life, regardless of whether there's an addictive personality.
Yeah.
There's just something, I can walk into a room and whatever my broken bits are, I'm going to find the exact person who's going to help me play that out in that relationship.
And because it's a known story for you.
Right. It's familiar.
Right? Like it's like sinking into a comfortable couch. Like, it's
Well, it's a
predictable.
lumpy couch. I don't know about how comfortable it is.
It's comfortable
It's
at the
just
beginning
familiar.
until the new couch smell's gone.
Yeah, maybe. It's just familiar.
Yeah.
And so then we feel like this instant attraction, but actually we might be playing out this codependent pattern. And with codependency, we end up taking on responsibilities for the other person.
Yes.
Or they allow us to take whatever. Like there's just this back and forth of over responsibility for the other person.
Yeah. And you know what? I can look back in my life and from the time I was a child and see what part I played in codependent relationships.
Right.
Right? It's harder now when you're in it.
Right. Yes, it is.
And we do that, like parenting is a lot of
Yeah.
codependency.
Yes, I think so. And I think that it requires honest conversations with ourselves. But also, I mean, I already shared the story about the time that I went to the pharmacy to get some cough medications for Amanda, my daughter, and how she didn't want it or need it, but I insisted on getting it. And then when I get home to give it to her, she's like, Mom, I think this is more about you than it is about me.
Touche.
It was so good because all I could do was laugh. So the cough syrup is now sitting in my cupboard because she didn't take it.
That is pretty funny.
But that's
and
the
that's
thing.
just a small thing.
I know, but it is giving my kids permission to call me on it because they can feel it. And when they're able to kind of go, Mom, you're trying too much or you're doing too much for me or whatever it might be, it's really helpful.
Okay, so confession.
Okay. Oh, I love confessions. Tell me more.
So currently my son is sitting in an airport in Rome
Oh, yes.
for a very long time, 13 hours layover. Brutal.
Yeah.
What was I doing last night? I was looking up what lounges were in the airport
But
and
you
what
could go
perks they had
my gosh.
and what price it was. So maybe I could get him a pass to one of the lounges so he wouldn't be bored for 13 hours.
You know what?
What was I doing?
I don't call that codependency. I call that being a loving mom.
Okay, well,
As long as you weren't losing sleep over it.
I'm not going there.
Okay. I think we are allowed to be generous with our kids.
Okay, now you're
without
just
being
you're
codependent.
enabling me right now.
I'm
okay?
totally because I have a lot of similar patterns.
But it's true. I mean, that's just, again, the cough syrup and the surfing for a lounge are very small, shareable moments in our
Exactly.
lives. We probably don't want to share the
No.
bigger parts.
No.
But you get what we're saying, okay?
Yeah.
You're with us. You know what we're talking about.
Yes. So
So what I've noticed is sometimes I'm coaching somebody and they can't figure out why they haven't landed their dream job. And then we start talking about the types of jobs that they've had.
Right.
And they're like they're more than well suited for their job. In fact, they're over suited for their job. But they keep picking these crappy work environments and these crappy bosses. You know what I mean?
Why is that?
Well, to prove themselves.
Oh, I
Right?
see. It's like it's a challenge or
It
something.
is. And you're just like, forget the crappy job and the crappy boss. Like, you're worth more than that.
Okay.
So these repetitive patterns, what
Right.
role is that person playing in that?
Okay, so here's a question.
Okay.
Think about a situation in your life that you're not that happy about. You got it in your mind?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so the question to ask yourself is, why am I here? What role am I playing in this situation? And what do I need to change to make the next one different, or even this one? What am I contributing to this dynamic?
Cloud says, and I love this, it hurts. He says, if we go through that and we can feel the pain and the hurt and the disappointment in the situations where we go, what role am I playing? And then see that as a situation where we can actually learn,
Yeah,
where we can get better,
Yeah.
where we can choose to play a different role. That's a person that takes feedback,
Right.
and then can change the outcomes to healthier and better outcomes for themselves.
so hopeful. I mean, I think that's the thing to keep in mind is that we don't do these ouchy things just to kind of give ourselves pain.
No.
But it's to grow from it. So think about the different aspects of your life, the different relationships, your job, school, finances, spiritual health, physical health. Just think about all the different areas of
Yeah.
your life. I know that there's going to be some areas that you know need change.
Yeah, of course.
And then if you can do this reflection of why am I here?
Yep.
And what have I contributed to this? What can I do differently?
Yep.
And you know what? If that doesn't come easily to mind, because a lot of times we ask these deep questions, especially if we've had a habit of avoiding these deep
Yeah.
questions because it's too painful, it may very well be that you have to talk to somebody who can ask you these objective questions and kind of help you see those patterns. So, like, we don't have to remain stuck. We don't have to remain in uncomfortable. I shouldn't say it. We will be in uncomfortable situations, but we don't have to remain in dysfunctional situations.
That's right, exactly. Something can
we can
be
do that.
uncomfortable
Right.
without being dysfunctional.
Dysfunctional. Ooh, that's a quotable. Hey, hashtag.
But, I think sometimes, unfortunately, the tendency is to bail out before the learning's done. Because it is painful. It does hurt.
Yes.
So the tendency may be to bail before that's done. If we can just persevere through it, persevere through the hurt and the disappointment and the ouchies. And if we see ourselves as victims where life happens to us, rather than someone who's playing an active role, if we're looking at ourselves as victims, we don't learn, we don't grow, we don't change. We just live life on repeat. I don't want that.
No.
Ugh.
Can I reframe that word persevere, though?
Sure.
Because I see people who remain stuck in really dysfunctional situations and they call it persevering.
Right.
So it's being able to discern when it's healthy growth versus stuck.
Okay.
And then maybe you're actually afraid of the change, or you're afraid of people's reactions if you were to make a change.
Because there's always pushback.
And there's always pushback, or you're afraid of loss of stability if you were to change from a job, or you've invested so much in your career that you don't want to change. Perseverance for the purpose of growth is gold.
And that's what
that's what you're talking about.
We're getting it.
But
not
perseverance,
perseverance like white knuckling, not
white
that.
knuckling and just staying stuck and feel like you have no choice. If that's what you think about perseverance, that's not what we're talking about here.
No, it's not.
So I just want to
So thank you for clarifying that. Because there is a difference between persevering for growth versus just, as you call it, white knuckling our way through life or sleepwalking through life.
Right.
Where we don't even pay attention
Right.
to the patterns that we're
Right.
stuck in.
I often will kind of look at it this way. If I'm kind of at a crossroads in my life, because things aren't going well in an area of my life, often the one that's most painful is actually the area of growth, and it actually means change. Sometimes it's easier well, it's not easier in the sense of pain, but at least it's familiar. So it's familiar pain.
Yeah.
So it's easier to stay in that place rather than the pain of change, because you have the pain of the unknown.
Right.
And you don't know, you can't predict. But again, if you see life as an opportunity to learn about yourself, to grow, to like experiment with finding out things with this whole growth mindset, then there's really no downside to really trying something else, especially if you've been stuck for a while.
And if there is no downside, it's that ready, aim, fire then.
Right.
You have to like take the risk.
You have to take the risk at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing I would say is like talk to people in your life, because I can see it in others far more than I can see it in myself. So in one of my situations, far outstayed my time there. And it was only once I removed myself from that situation, I was able to go back and go, what the heck took me so long? But this sense of loyalty and responsibility, and there's always a rational reason. But ultimately, it was because I was afraid that I was going to let people down.
Right. Because it's always about the people for you.
It's always about the people for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a problem with that.
So there's a good question too, is what am I just staying with
Right.
for whatever reason that isn't working, and it really is time for me to figure out whether I stay or whether I go.
Right. Right. So I think in the broader picture, some of you are listening or watching right now, and it's coming straight to mind. You already know that stuck place you're in. And then taking the time to ask your question is, why am I here? What part do I play? What needs to change can help us make that shift. And the good thing about change is it's always if you ever watch the show on Apple TV, the one called Shrinking, lots of things about it it's kind of like not psychologically sound because they're all therapists there, but it's so funny. But one of the therapists talks about the power of the boop. And so the boop is just that little bit of change.
Yes.
And you do enough of them, like an angle, the trajectory of your life begins to change. So you can do that.
And we're going to talk about that in another chapter.
Yes.
Because change typically is incremental.
Yes.
Change that sticks.
Right.
Unless it's something completely life-changing.
Right.
But change is incremental, and the little increments that you make can lead to huge gains.
Right. And if nothing comes to mind about things that you can change because everything's going well, then I would ask you to consider, am I just being complacent? And then just like I do an annual retreat, and it is a reflection of the past year and the things that went well and didn't go so well, and then sort of my thinking and planning and dreaming for the year to come. And one of the things I do is I do a search in all the different areas of my life, and I think about where is it that perhaps I'm a little stuck, or I'm a little afraid, or there's some issue I haven't dealt with. And then I'm actually very concrete coming out of that time of reflection and making decisions about changes that I have to make.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't always implement them.
That's a whole other podcast episode
there
for
you go.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, what is the goal here? The goal here is to ask the hard question and then to be willing to learn from it, right?
Right. And then own your part, like own where you are and find agency in that. So,
well, I journaled like 4 pages of this for myself.
Oh, you did? Good for you.
Yes. Oh,
well, I need to read that.
It's hitting me in the solar plexus, as you say. So
Gillian has given me the keys to where her journals are locked, so that if she goes before me, I'm supposed to go burn them.
Yep, they're burned. They're getting burned for sure. All of it.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in. That was a tough one. Lots of processing. Well worth picking up the book if you haven't already, even just for that chapter alone. But hang in there. We're with you through this as we're kind of working through some of the tough parts of this. I hope you feel encouraged that change can happen and this can be good.
True.
Yes.
See you next time.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Fully Lived Life podcast. We hope you found it encouraging and helpful. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family and posting on your social media. Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode.